Go to the All right. So I basically got started with first of all, working with lawyers. I was just looking for a niche to target where I don't know if you know this guy called Alex Hormozy. He's a business guy who talks about if you're gonna start a business, you might as well just target higher profile people who have money to buy your services. So I was sitting down, I was just like, what niche can I go into or try to go into where the market is there? I could easily find them and also they have money to invest in whatever I want to sell. And then I was just watching this show called Suits. It sounds cheesy, but I was watching Suits and I was just like, why don't I just target lawyers? And then that's how it came about. Just target lawyers, try to understand as much as possible about the industry, and then go from there. And that's how I ended up here.
Very good. How's it
Mhm.
going so far? How's your product going? And remind me the name. Is it
Retric Solutions.
Retric Solutions? How's it
Yeah.
going? Do you have some customers?
No, not yet, but I'm making more connections in the industry. Again, this past year or the past 6 months of this year is just focused on learning as much as possible about my target audience first, while also building some automations, but I need to understand their main problems first before I could, start pitching them something that, works. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So
It
based
does.
yeah, based on the research that I found so far, the main bottlenecks that law firms have is not really necessarily the actual legal work, it's the business around it. So getting leads, converting leads into paying customers, and doing that at scale. So that's why I decided let's look into AI and different ways to help them, kind of smoothen out the workflow process and also help them, anywhere outside the actual legal work. That's where my AI systems could help them in.
So what is your background area? Or what industry have you been? Is it in marketing? Is it
Yeah.
in entrepreneurship? Is it in product design? What's your background so far?
So my background so far, ever since high school, has been entrepreneurship and marketing. So I got into entrepreneurship, I want to say junior year or sophomore year of high school. I started my own ecom brand, and then I immediately started running ads for the brand, but I lost so much money because I didn't understand how to run Facebook ads or in general product market fit. I just got something from Amazon, put my logo on it, and I was just like, let me sell it. So that was a hard
Yes.
way to learn that you need to understand your market and your actual client first before you sell them something. So yeah, my background is in marketing and business. So I decided to close that shop down and then focus more on learning as much as possible about marketing. So that's why I got into the brand lab thing where they help African Americans get a foot into the marketing industry. So by placing them in internships at different agencies or companies to help them learn as much as possible about marketing. So that's where I met your son at that event.
Yeah.
So yeah.
This is great. Well, I can start talking about a lot of different things that I think might be of interest to you, and I can
Yeah, I
kind of
have
give
some.
you a table of contents of what they might be. But
Right.
do you have questions? We can start with your questions. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have
yeah.
more than a half hour. I don't have anything the rest of the afternoon, so I have as
All right.
much time as you need.
Sounds good. So yeah, I do have a few questions here for you. So I'll get started with this. So I saw on your LinkedIn that you are a certified AI governance professional. So how did you like to kind of get an idea of your background? How did you get started in this field?
Sure. So I had the really good luck. There's really not another way to put it, but I have the really good luck of sometimes being in the right place at just the right time. So I worked at a company. I worked at a company called GitHub, which
Hmm.
is a subsidiary of Microsoft. And
Hmm.
GitHub is the place where a lot of people store their source code. It's
Right.
also where a lot of, I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but it's where a lot of public coding gets done too. Like during the pandemic, you might have seen that map of where the pandemic was and how it was spreading. Well,
Hmm.
down at the bottom of it, there was a little link to GitHub because that map was created by a community of a bunch of different software developers who were working together to make it work. And so they were sort of publicly coding and creating something that was open to the public. And then people could take that map if they wanted to, and they could create their own version of it or make their improvements to it. So it's sort of this idea of kind of open source
Hmm.
software. So anyway, so I was at GitHub, and my boss asked me one day. He said, "Do you want to work on this new product? It's going to be AI powered. We're going to work with a company called OpenAI. Their founder's name is Sam Altman, and we're going to try to use OpenAI. We're going to try to teach it how to code. So we're going to train it on all the source code that we have, all of our public source code, and we're going to teach it to code, and we're going to make coders' lives better and developers' lives better.
Right.
And we need an agreement because Sam Altman wants to demo this to Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, right?
Okay.
So I was like, okay, that doesn't happen every day, right? Like I'm usually not asked to work on a project for someone who's going to demo something to Satya Nadella. And who's Sam Altman? I never heard of him before. What's OpenAI? This was 2020.
Right.
So I was like, wow, what is this?
Right.
So I dug in and I worked really hard and I worked on that product for about 2 years
Hmm.
and it launched in beta in 2021. And it is now one of the most successful generative AI tools. People are paying hundreds of millions of dollars a year to use it. And it actually helps coders and developers code faster,
Right.
better, not have to do so much drudgery, et cetera. So
Exactly.
after about 2 years at GitHub, I then joined Eightfold AI.
Hmm.
Eightfold AI is a company headquartered in Santa Clara, California, and we use AI to assess job applicants in
Okay.
a way where we seek to remove as much bias as possible from assessing people. So we're really looking at people's talents, their skills, and their background, not their personal characteristics or their
Hmm.
names or their pronouns or anything else, or their age or their disability or whatever, anything that doesn't have to do with their abilities as an employee. And so I've been here for about 2 years. So I've been working in AI for 4 years.
Hmm.
I was kind of ahead of the generative AI boom by about a year and a half. And so I decided to go and get an AI governance professional certification just to
Okay.
sort of show that, yeah, I know what I'm doing in this area. There's a lot of people talking about AI, but
Yeah.
to get that certification, you have to pay a few $100s, but really you need to study and take an exam, which is pretty challenging.
Hmm.
And I probably studied 20 hours for it. I knew a lot of this stuff
Oh,
already, but I still
okay.
had to study quite a bit and take the test. So I took the test as a way to sort of show, yeah, I kind of know what I'm doing.
Right. Maybe I need to take that test as well, because
Yeah, I just had someone else reach out to me about two people today asking me about the test and whether they should take it and prepare for it. I was invited to write questions for the test in the future. So I'm going to try and be involved with that as well. So anyway, that's a long answer to your question.
what was that? Did you just find certification course, or is there a specific one
So,
that you went to?
so the International Association of Privacy Professionals, the IAPP, is sort of the leading organization that issues credentials
Mm.
for people in the area of privacy. They started doing this when the General Data Protection Regulation came in Europe in 2016. So Europe passed this big privacy law in 2016. It applies to US companies because you can't really sell in Europe unless you comply with that privacy law. And so this nonprofit sprung up and said, let's find a way to train people in as privacy professionals. Let's have them take exams and issue certifications. So I have a certification for US privacy and European privacy. I've had those for about 2 years. And then this year was the first year the IAPP said, let's create a certification for AI governance. So they launched that in
Mhm.
March. I passed the exam in April. And, I think I officially got my certification a month or something after that. So it's very
Okay.
much a brand new certification, but it's from
Okay.
a very reputable organization.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check that out for sure. You said IAPP to go over
Yep.
there. And then you said they teach you how to code and then they train you how to do everything and then you take the test after?
The IAPP just gives, I can show you the website. Why don't I share my screen? I can show you
Okay,
that.
cool.
Probably easier. So, let me get the right screen here. Which one is it? Um, close this. Hold on a second.
Sounds
This is
good.
the work. Um, so this is their website. Can you see the IAPP screen? Is it
Yep.
working or?
Yep. I can see it.
So the homepage is just kind of about them and what they do. You can learn about how they handle personal data in China if you want,
Right.
but it's a community. They do conferences and then they do certifications, and it's all in the area of AIGP is about AI governance, but these other ones are all about privacy, U.S. privacy, European privacy, how to be a privacy manager, how to be a privacy technologist. Honestly, I don't, as an entrepreneur, I don't know how important it would be for you to look into this.
Hmm.
Um, it's just a, it's just a company that you can join a community. If you pass their tests, you can get certified, and you can sort of use those certifications as badges as
Right.
an attorney to tell my employer or to tell clients, hey, I know something about this area. I'm
Okay.
more expert in it.
I bet I'll definitely check it out for sure. And then the other question I had was, what are your overall thoughts of AI in the legal space? Obviously, there is a lot of ethics behind it, and a lot of lawyers are iffy about it. What are your thoughts on it?
Thank you for asking that question. That was one of the areas I was thinking about covering. So I am very bullish on the use of AI in the practice of law. I have been a part of the legal tech community for probably the last 7 to 10 years.
Mm.
I had a small little company that I tried to bootstrap myself that was a legal tech startup. And so I went to a number of conferences, I did some pitches, I talked to a lot of the influencers and kind of thought leaders in legal tech.
Okay.
Um, and I'm very excited about how technology could improve the practice of law, including AI. And I have a lot of thoughts on how I think that can be done correctly, and a lot of thoughts on how I think it could be done incorrectly. Both not so much from an ethical standpoint. I think the ethics will sort of sort themselves out. Bar associations will figure that out. The courts will figure that out. The things that I'm talking about in terms of what I think are the right and the wrong way to do things are more about user interfaces and how there's a lot of legal technology service providers that fail. And a lot of times, I'll show you this one. It's funny,
Mhm.
but a lot of the reason that they cite is they kind of blame the clients. They sort of say, well, it didn't work because lawyers are slow, lawyers are late adopters, lawyers are, they're not very tech savvy.
Mhm.
And if you give them anything that's complicated, they just won't learn it. And I think there's some truth in that. But my closely held belief is that if your UI requires training and your UI requires um, an attorney to take a lot of time out of their day to figure something out, then maybe the problem isn't that attorneys are slow or
Right.
that we're whatever. The problem is the UI. So I'll read this to you because it's very small. But
Yeah.
Damian Real, if you're not following Damian, you should. Damian is someone I've known for a long time, and he's great. But he links in another person called Casey Flaherty, who I've known for a long time, and Casey's also great. Like if you put kind of together like a top 10 of thought leaders and influencers in legal tech, I think you could probably put Damien in there for sure, and probably Casey as well. But the first thing is the robot says, it says, I can do contract review. And the lawyer says, well, I need contract analytics. Come back when you can do that. And it comes back, I'm upgraded. I can do review analytics. Yeah, but can you do drafting? Yeah, now I can do all those things. I'm sorry, you're too complex. I can't use you. Right. So
Yeah.
that's sort of the story about lawyers. I mean, I can tell you a lot of things about your target market, about lawyers and kind of how they think and how they buy and how their businesses operate. I'd be happy to tell you as much as you think would be helpful. But I like this. I like this comic strip. But I also feel like, well, I think the lawyer's right. Like the
Hmm.
lawyer is saying, you didn't design a UI that's easy enough for me to use, so I'm going to stick with what I'm already doing. So
Right.
you asked me a question about kind of what I think about AI and the law. That was, another long answer, but I hope that gives you a sense for sort of how my mind works a little bit.
Right. That's perfect. And I'm writing notes, by the way, so if I look down, I'm not ignoring
Yeah,
you. Um,
no worries.
Yeah, so you said you could give me a lot more insights about my target audience, which is lawyers. So I'm gonna deep dive into that a little bit. How do they buy? Because the main issue I'm struggling with right now when it comes to trying to get clients is that they're so tight knit. They
Yeah,
don't want to step out a little bit, which is fine. I get it. But how do they buy? Like, how do I angle myself or my approach to get into the inner circle, if that makes sense?
sure thing. I'll give you some advice on that, and I'll try to do it. Well, I can do it in two ways, right?
Hmm.
I can do it in a way that I can do both as well. I can do it in a way that sort of talks to the product you've built.
Hmm.
I can do it in a way that talks to other products that you might consider building, and
Hmm.
I can do it both ways, I suppose. So, do you have a preference in what order we go or what we
Yeah,
cover?
so let's start with the products that I've already built. So right now, the main focus that I'm trying to refine is AI voice assistants and website chatbots because lawyers have websites and they might be getting a lot of traffic into the website, but they're not converting that website traffic into, collected leads. So the website chatbot that I'm looking to build is not the generic version, but the one that you could before they interact with it, they insert their first name, last name, email, basic information, none too crazy, and then they get to ask the chatbot questions about the law firm. Not giving any legal advice or anything because obviously we don't want to do that, but just because when you're looking for something, you want your answers quick. So by having a chatbot that's conversational and interactive, that's a good idea to one, generate leads and also get their answers faster. And then the second thing is an AI voice assistant, where let's say, for example, you're running a law firm and you have marketing ads running. The more ads that are coming from your marketing efforts, obviously you're not going to call all of them in a span of 24 hours. So the AI voice assistant is kind of there to help you qualify more leads and schedule more appointments for you. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Okay,
Yeah.
so the first thing I'm going to say is a rule that I think is generally correct, and it's something I learned from being in legal tech. I think most people would agree with it.
Hmm.
If you're going to serve lawyers or you're going to create a legal tech product, you need to have a lawyer involved, right? You
Hmm.
either need one of those on your board of advisors or you need one of those in your design team or something like that.
Okay.
That is a rule that I would say is pretty true because most people who aren't lawyers, Damien and I were talking about this about a month ago. I said, why isn't legal tech better? Like, I've been practicing law for 19 years. Like, why does it take so long? Why is there no GitHub Copilot for
Hmm.
lawyers? And he said, because most of the times it's software engineers trying to create these products. And they look at the practice of law and they think about it as like a math problem or a logic problem to solve. And
Hmm.
that's not really what it is, despite like what you see on TV or what you might have heard. Can I tell you a quick joke about engineers?
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a lot of jokes about lawyers. Here's my
Uh-huh.
joke about engineers. So, a priest, a doctor, and an engineer are on a golf course, and the group in front of them is really slow. And so the owner of the golf course comes out and he says, "Hey guys, I'm really sorry. The group in front of you, they're vision impaired, and they come out and they play with beeper balls on Tuesday mornings, and they just need a while. I'm sorry."
Yeah.
And the doctor says, "Well, I know some people who work in the vision area, and they're doing some great things. Maybe they can help restore their sight."
Hmm.
And the priest says, "I'll pray to the Lord Almighty that he will restore their sight." And the engineer says, "Why can't they just play at night?"
Okay.
Right? So
Yeah.
engineers are like, they solve problems in a very logical
In a
way,
logical
but
way,
their
yeah.
solutions are often so bizarre, they don't really comport with reality, right? Like no one's showing up at a golf course at
At
night.
night.
And why should they, why would they have to play at night? Right. So
Right.
so that's sort of when software engineers try to solve legal problems through technology, they almost always fail. When
Okay.
people who aren't lawyers are trying to do it, it's very challenging. So what I learned when I had a legal tech startup is uh, I needed a developer, right? Like I understood the legal part of it, but I needed a
Mhm.
developer. So even though I've been a lawyer for a long time, when I was starting my startup, I did the exact same thing you're doing. I talked to a bunch of lawyers
Mhm.
because I was selling a product for a different type of lawyer than I am. I was trying to sell to solo attorneys and small firms, which I've never done. So that's not an area that I know a lot about. So I did a lot of calls to try and figure out what they do and what they might be interested in. So now I'll try to give you a little bit more direct advice if it's
Mhm.
helpful.
Yep.
Um, Rather than focusing on how they buy, you'll want to focus on what is their business model. And the way that work comes into small firms is for the most part word of mouth, right? Most times people, when they're looking for a lawyer, ask someone for a referral. Hey, my son got a DWI. Do you know someone who works in that area who's good? My best friend's husband was struck and killed by a car. Now she needs to work out all these issues. Do you know someone who knows about wrongful death? And so even like I've had these sorts of situations happen And when people ask me for that, I say, well, let me think about someone who's in my network that I know and I trust, or
Mhm.
someone who I can ask for a referral. So it's very much a referral based approach. You can advertise, that's important. You need to have a good website, that's important too. But
Mhm.
there are not a lot of areas of the law where you have a high volume of leads coming in that you need to qualify. Um,
Mhm.
I'm not trying to say you're on the wrong path. There, talk to attorneys that are in the market you're trying to sell to, which sounds like small and solo attorneys, and the things they're thinking about on their websites to qualify leads. And
Mhm.
I could be wrong about that, but um, I would just make sure you understand their their flow
Right.
of business, how they're doing right now, what you're trying to automate, and whether there's a strong need and product fit. And maybe you've already done that.
Yeah, so I'm primarily not focusing on the small solopreneur type law firms. I'm mostly focusing on medium to large firms where they do have some sort of system going on and some staff members in there, let's say 9 or 10 people. They just look to like save time in their end. Does that make sense? So we're not
Yeah.
we're
What firms are you talking to? Like,
so
how have you
so
done research on that?
Yeah, so I invested in LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and it kind of
Yeah.
gives you a little bit more insights on who's who on LinkedIn, and just starting small conversations with different people. But obviously, a lot of the times I get ghosted or they're too busy. I reached them at the wrong
Hmm.
time or whatever. But I've connected with a few law firm partners. It's just like I said, it's so hard to get in contact with them because like I said, my biggest weakness is I'm not a lawyer, like you said. So
Yeah.
that advice of having a lawyer as a legal advisor when it comes to building legal tech is really important, and I like that. So far, again, just trying to start conversations, nothing too solid
Yeah.
as of yet. So,
So the people you should be seeking out are in legal operations,
mm,
probably not partners and lawyers. But if you're looking at a medium to large size firm, you'll want to find people who are working in legal operations. They have a group that they're a part of called CLOC, Chief Legal Officers Group, or something like that. CLOC. And there's a lot of people who work in the industry of legal operations and how to make lawyers more efficient. And if that's who, who you're, the Corporate Legal Operations Consortium, if that's who you're trying to sell to, you
mm,
should talk to those individuals because they
okay.
will understand how their firms handle incoming traffic of people who might be interested in using the firm.
P.
Still, though, I mean, I would say I used to be at a firm of about 180 lawyers in Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
The way clients came in, it was still very person to person and
Personal.
very
Okay.
referral, right? Which was, hey, I need a bankruptcy attorney. Do you know anyone? Well, there's this person at this law firm. You should look on their website. You should look at his bio and just
Mm-hmm.
send him an email. And his assistant will probably get back to you, or her assistant will get back to you and say, hey, thanks for reaching out to Brad. He'd love to schedule some time with you, a 30-minute free consultation.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell me more about what you're interested in?
Mm-hmm.
So I think even at large firms, it's it's not the model where they're getting, I would think, 100 people a month coming to their website asking to hire them as lawyers, and those leads need to be qualified.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there might be other parts of the law that are more like this, that have like a high volume, but I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If you were selling to smaller firms or to solos,
Mm-hmm.
then there is a company called Clio,
Yep. Yep.
CL. So they are basically like the practice management solution for small attorneys. They have a lot of apps. They have like an app store. So you can sort of see what companies are springing up around Clio that are trying to serve the business needs of small and solo attorneys. Most attorneys in the United States are solo attorneys or at firms of less than 5 people.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the attorneys in the US are in that bucket. They still have money to spend. They're often probably easier to sell to in some ways than large law firms.
Okay.
Selling to lawyers is sort of always a hassle, to be quite honest. Like, we're not all that easy to sell to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And yeah, I would just sort of think about that a little bit. Um, so so I can tell you an idea that I think is a pretty good idea
Hmm.
that might illustrate some of the things I've talked about. I'm not sure if you want to do sort of a pivot here, but I can tell you about one thing that I think um, is going on that's not really being addressed for lawyers. But I
Yeah.
want to make sure I'm answering your questions before I sort of go in a different direction.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm here to learn.
Okay, um, so a lot of what I see going on in legal tech is people are trying to take an existing paradigm and then wedge the practice of law into it. So the paradigm right now with a lot of AI is prompt and response, prompt and response. And the reason that's the paradigm is because of ChatGPT. That's what most people are familiar with. That's probably what most people think about with AI right now is prompt and response.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you about how the workflow, like in my world and most lawyers I know, here's how the workflow actually goes. People don't prompt me for answers, right? They don't come to me and ask me a specific question and then ask a specific answer.
Hmm.
They sometimes do, but usually when that happens, I have a conversation with them and I realize what they're really asking for isn't what they need, right?
Right.
Where it goes is usually more like this. Someone has a problem. They can't really articulate it. They can't um, they can't think like a lawyer because they're not a lawyer. And what they really need to do is they need to dump a bunch of information on a lawyer and
Hmm.
have the lawyer figure out what's relevant or what's not and issue spot. So in law school, you learn when they talk about like how do you learn to be a lawyer? How do you think like a lawyer? Issue spotting is a key skill. And so a lot of law school exams are built on this idea. The professor just writes a big long story and says, now what do you do? And so in a case like contracts, it might be a big long story about two parties that entered into a contract, a bunch of stuff went wrong. And the question in the that you have 3 hours to complete is, so what do you do? What advice do you give the client? That is, I thought it was kind of silly in law school, but that's
Hmm.
actually the way that people practice law. So I'll give you a real life example. A friend of mine, her husband was in fact killed in a crosswalk in New Orleans. He had a business, and his brother was his business partner, and they didn't get along very well. He had insurance. He had he had a number of other things going on. And so my friend came to me distraught, and she's just telling me all these things that are going on. And she said, "You're a lawyer. Can you help me find some people to help you?" And I said, "Well, I'm your friend. I'm a lawyer. I don't do any of the type of things I can't solve any of your problems because I don't work in those areas.
Hmm.
But I know some people who are helpful, right? I know someone who can help you with this small business issue that you have. I know someone who can help you with this wrongful death issue that you're going to have with the trucking company that killed your husband. And I know some people who can help find probate attorneys and people who can help you settle his estate, right? So what I did is I did not terribly great, but I did some issue spotting where it's like, okay, she told me all these problems. Now, how do I put those in different buckets? And how do I get them to the right person? And then that person does their own issue spotting and decides what are the issues here. Okay, it's in New Orleans. Well, that means I need to find someone in Louisiana and all these other things. You start going down this giant tube of legal advice, and it gets very complicated. But at a high level, that's how it works. People dump stories on you. You need to figure out what part of the story is, you need to structure that story in a way, and you need to start pushing out the work and the responses. It's
Hmm.
that's how it all works. So it's not prompt and response, although I guess you could dump a 4-page story
Right.
into, and I'm getting to this, you could
ChatGPT,
dump
yeah.
a 4-page story into generative AI and say, what
Hmm.
are the issues here? How do I handle them? What do I do next? And I'm sure if you've been to a doctor recently and they've been using a computer and you've been watching what they do,
Hmm.
they're being very effective in a way that lawyers are often aren't. They're having someone kind of screen you initially. Let's put that aside. But
Hmm.
they come into the room and they start asking you questions. And then usually at the end of it, they're typing something into a computer or they're saying something into a dictation, situation. They're capturing the notes.
Hmm.
So it's, patient came in with pain in his heel. Patient believes it's a bone spur. I'm not necessarily convinced of that. I think it could be these three other things. The first thing we're going to do is perform an ultrasound to make sure that it's not a cyst, right? This happened to me, right? They did the ultrasound. They're like, it's a cyst.
Hmm.
Great. We'll pierce the cyst. You'll go home, right?
Hmm.
So doctors are the exact same sort of thing in a way. They get a story dumped on them. They
Hmm.
need to figure out what's most relevant, and then they need to start pushing it towards next steps and solutions. Doctors have a lot more money than lawyers. They have a lot better technology.
Hmm.
They have a lot more people investing in their efficiency. So if you want to see what lawyers should be doing, go to a doctor for something, and you'll see the way that they're doing it. So that's a very
Okay.
long story, but here's the valuable part of it. Okay, I've saved the gold for the end of the rainbow here. There are all number of solutions that will record phone calls. You're using one right now.
Hmm.
I'm assuming at the end of this call, you will get not only a transcript, but you will get some sort of AI analytics about here's the things that Tom talked about. Here's some possible next steps and the like. I don't know if you're using Zoom AI Companion or you're using something similar to that or Google Gemini or whatever. Which one are you using?
I primarily just use Zoom.
Okay, so use Zoom. So Zoom AI Companion will provide an AI powered summary of the call.
Hmm.
It'll give you analytics like, boy, Tom sure talked a lot. And it'll also, he talked 90% of the call or something like that. Here are the things that he talked about the most. Here are some possible next steps. And here was the structure of the discussion. There are many, many companies working on solving that problem, right? So you have this over here. You have people who are already solving that problem of how do I take people dumping stories on someone, which is kind of what I've been doing in this call, right?
Yeah.
And helping you understand what's the most relevant thing here and what are the next steps. So that part of the equation is solved. You
Hmm.
also have this thing over here, which is what I will call AI powered legal advice. So you've got companies like Westlaw, LexisNexis,
LexisNexis.
VLEX. You have companies that are sitting on huge amounts of structured data about the law. Those used to be in books and libraries. Then they were put on CD-ROMs and sold as software. Then they were put in the cloud. Now they're being combined with generative AI LLM models, and they've got that figured out, right? But what they don't have in the middle is an interface.
Hmm.
So if I have someone who dumps a bunch of problems on me, and I have a printout or um, an AI summary of what we discussed, and maybe I'm being really intentional
Hmm.
while I'm having the phone call. I'm being like the doctor at the end of the meeting, where I say, okay, thanks, Elizabeth, for telling me all the problems that you have. Here's what I think are the next, I'm going to say the next steps so that they get recorded in the AI analytics. Here's what I think the next steps are: one, two, three, four, five, right? And in order to perform those steps, I'm going to need to do A, B, C, D, E, right? You probably don't need to do that in front of Elizabeth. You could
Hmm.
probably do that after let Elizabeth off the call. But
Right.
there's this certain component where you're doing that, and the AI is saying, but did you think about this? She mentioned this thing. Did you think about that? She mentioned it was in Louisiana. Do you realize that you're probably going to need a lawyer in Louisiana to help with this? And then the doctor or the lawyer, says, yeah, I already know that. But in some cases, you might say, oh, great, I forgot about that. I failed to spot that issue, right? So it can help you make a better diagnosis, right? Did you think that maybe it's just a cyst, right? Before you set up, an X-ray, why don't you get out the sonogram and make sure there's no fluid in it? Because if there's fluid in it, it's a cyst, right?
Hmm.
So it helps you do the issue spotting, right? But the problem is there's a huge open chasm in the middle. I don't know that anyone's working on this. Maybe someone is. But what you need to do is you need to take all that information out of that memo. And now I need to turn my head, open up another piece of software, go into Westlaw or LexisNexis and start putting in prompts to start doing the research and figuring things out. Well, wouldn't it be much better if there was a piece of software that connected those two things? It connected the results of that discussion and how I've kind of decided to do next steps. And then I can just start pushing the questions straight into a legal research system, which then pulls out the answers.
Mhm.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you would need I mean, you'd obviously need a developer. You'd need someone who has some AI chops and other things. But, and I'm sure it's not this easy, but
Hmm.
all it is basically building the bridge between companies that are creating summaries of phone calls and companies that have super powered AI legal research and, AI, quote unquote, AI lawyers, and combine them where you can take the input and you can produce the output. And what you can see is that's not prompt and response,
Hmm.
unless you consider the prompt is a big dump of a story, and the response is go ahead and prompt something else. Anyway, so I hope that's clear. But if I were starting a legal tech company today,
Hmm.
that might be one of the ideas I would think about is the interface between AI call recording technology used by lawyers and AI powered research platforms used by lawyers to make it so that you can do more things by voice. Just have a conversation, review the memo at the end of it. You can talk to the memo and say, hey, remove the second paragraph, add another point, add point five. You can get that all figured out. You can get some prompts there where it's saying, did you think about this? Did you think about that? And it's just connecting the wiring between these systems. I don't know that you'd have to build the whole thing in order to pitch it, but you would need to have a plan for it, and you would need to find backers to finance it.
Right.
Anyway, I don't know how excited you get about things like that,
Yeah,
but I think
I have so many ideas in my head that just popped up. I'm writing so many notes. And give me 1 second. Insurance.
so. I would be happy to partner with you on something like that if that's what you're interested in doing. I think what I bring to the table, if you end up looking into this, like what I can bring to the table is I know all the people in legal tech. Like
Hmm.
I know the main influencers, I know the thought leaders, I know people who've successfully launched legal tech companies.
Right.
I know people who are at those legal at Westlaw and at LexisNexis and at VLex. So I sort of know the players. The competitors for something like that would be, and I don't think because they're kind of slow moving, but the competitors would be VLex, who's actually fast moving, or Westlaw or LexisNexis, who are slow moving, where they would say, yeah, why don't we just tie AI companion, Zoom AI companion into this new product we're building? They might be thinking about it already,
Hmm.
but I don't know how they'd implement it. A lot of these companies are still stuck in the open up our website and start putting in questions about the law, and we'll start providing you answers to it versus just get the story dumped on you, structure it a little bit, push it into us, and we'll start doing the thinking for you.
Mm. So find a way to connect. So the idea I'm thinking of is find a way to connect my voice assistant to something like knowledge base like Westlaw or Nexus AI and have some sort of bridge, like you said, where it's able to take that value dump or the story dump, figure out what's the actual term? Issue spot,
Issue spotting.
issue spot what the story is about, and then provide the lawyer some sort of next step or some sort of summary slash what to do next based on the story. Does that make sense?
Right. Yes. And
Yeah.
that's where things will get. And that way, like the key to GitHub Copilot, the key to bringing generative AI to coders and developers is
Hmm.
we never made them leave the place they were already working,
Right.
right? They were already working in Microsoft Visual Studio. They were already working in integrated development environments, IDEs is what they're called. We didn't say, oh, you want to use OpenAI powered AI? We've got to leave where you are, go work in this other tool. We just baked it right into where they already were. So for lawyers, where lawyers already are is Word.
Right.
We're kind of cavemen. We use old tools. So if you can create a voice assistant, you can take the call recording technology, get it to a point where it spits out a document. A lawyer can look at that document and with their voice start saying what edits they want to it and what next steps they want taken. And you can have them push that or connect that to another system. That's the way. And these systems can already, like, you can ask these systems, like, write me a memo on wrongful death in the state of Louisiana um, about a pedestrian struck by a commercial vehicle, they can probably do that already, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So, so what you need is you need to take the call where someone dumps that story on you, create the document where it starts to get structured, or it could be a different interface, right? It could just be an interface that lists the issues that are whatever. It doesn't have to be a document.
Hmm.
And then you can start doing next steps. The next thing we'll need is a memo from LexisNexis AI about wrongful death in Louisiana for a commercial vehicle hitting a pedestrian, right? And you can start pulling in that data. Okay, now we need this, now we need that. And if you create sort of a platform or you create whatever the right UI is between the call recording and analytics and the research tools that really practice law. So the tools kind of help you practice law. The
Hmm.
recording helps you gather facts and
Right.
organize them. And then you need some interface in the middle that's AI powered that can help refine, summarize, prompt another system, etc.
Okay. That is a lot of value. Thank you so much. The other question, the other question I had was, what are some red flags that would stand out to you? Let's say, for example, if you were a law firm and I came to you with this idea like, yo, you can leverage a voice assistant to collect all the stories and also help you issue spot match faster. What would the potential red flags be to you that would stand out to you if somebody pitched you that idea or that so?
um, yeah, I would say there's a couple things. First of all, like law firms you can approach. Some law firms will invest in an idea and help stand it up, but many are not that entrepreneurial. Most law firms aren't interested until you can sell them the thing that's already made and is tested, and you can show them how it saves them money and time. And even then, they might not buy it.
Mhm.
Can I tell you one quick story?
Yeah, sure.
So there's a company called Logical,
Mhm.
Logikcull. They do e-discovery. E-discovery is a part of litigation. It's basically using technology to review documents and try to pull the relevant information out of documents. So
Mhm.
I met the founder of Logical when I was sort of doing my legal tech thing, and his company didn't do very well for a long time. Then it took off like a shot. And I asked him, "How did you suddenly start making so much money?" And he said, "Well, I sold my product in a way where the law firms can just pass the cost on to their clients. So instead of selling them a product that the law firm had to pay for, and they would get a year's worth of it, I sold it to them in a way where they could just make it specific to a client matter, and then they could pass the cost on to the client." And he said, "Once I did that, I made a ton of money." So law firms don't like to spend their own money. They like to find ways that they can take a service and pass the cost of it onto their clients. Anyway, so your question was like, what red flags would you have?
Mhm.
The answer, and it's a roundabout answer, is legal innovation is going to come from only a few different places. Law firms, I think that's very unlikely, but it's possible. Some do it. It could come from in house legal departments at corporations. I think that's even less likely for a number of reasons. It
Mhm.
can come from legal tech startups like yours or like VLEX or like Logical or whatever. That is the most likely. That's where the innovation is going to come from. So I think a law firm would say, great, how do I make sure all the data is secure? And what that it all stays confidential. And what you would probably have an answer would be, well, we some parts of this we don't handle that, right? We integrate to Zoom AI Companion or to Google Gemini or to these other huge reputable companies that invest millions of dollars in security, right? So you don't need to worry about that part of the
Mhm.
equation because really big companies are taking care of that and they're keeping the data secure. Once the data comes into your system or hits the law firm systems, you need an answer for that, right? Like, how are you securing it? Blah, blah, blah. And then once you push it to Westlaw or to LexisNexis, again, you have a huge company over there that's invested in security. So what you would probably want to do is structure it in a way where as little data sits on your systems as possible. And for the most part, you're leveraging the huge security infrastructure at Zoom and at Westlaw and other places. So that might be one of them. But I think a lot of this is back to the future, when I started practice in 2005, I worked with a gentleman who never had a computer on his desk. He was older. He had a bunch of
Mhm.
pencils. And I watched him work and I thought, how is this guy going to be productive? He doesn't have a computer. But what he could do is he could grab a piece of paper and take a pencil and he could work. His mind worked in such a way that he
Mhm.
could create things very quickly. And even better, he could grab his dictaphone, just a call recording device. This is before cell phones, right? This is before smartphones. This is 2005. So he could grab a little recorder and he could start talking, right? And I remember sitting there looking at him like, how is he able to talk in complete paragraphs? Like he's not just talking in complete sentences. He knows what the topic sentence is, and then he's doing 4 or 5 other sentences. Then he's moving on to the next one, and then he's walking out his door. He's handing it to his secretary. And I came out of that meeting and I realized this guy's a hell of a lot more productive than I am
Right.
because I can't type very well, and
Right.
yet I'm typing and I'm spell checking my own work and
Right.
I'm proofreading my own work and I'm doing all these other things. This old guy with a bunch of pencils and a hand recorder is more productive than I am. So
Right.
if you can get to a solution where lawyers are just talking, they're talking into something, they're guiding it with their voice, and you can show a lawyer like all you've got to do is record the conversation. It's going to help you structure your thoughts. You can then talk to it more to further structure your thoughts. You can then push it into these workflows to start work getting done. I think most lawyers would say, yeah, I can't type either. And this is a huge improvement. And yeah, like I get it. So I think law firms would get it if you demo it to them. Their concerns would be about privacy and security for the most part.
Right. So something like Jarvis or something where, you just talking to, hey, Jarvis, do this, Jarvis, do that.
Right. And that's where we're going to get like these tools like GitHub Copilot already has a voice interface to it. We're going to see more and more, I think, voice interfaces with these LLMs where we're not going to be typing things into keyboards. We're going to be saying things like, yeah, the second paragraph's good, but rephrase it. It needs to be more client friendly, right? Like that's where we're going to be, I think, sooner rather than later.
Okay.
And
This is
that was actually how law was practiced before personal computers
mhm.
and before, like before I started practicing, it was use a dictaphone, write things out on paper, hand it to your secretary because she can type a lot faster than you can and a lot better.
Mhm.
So why the hell do you have a lawyer typing? There's a classic there's a classic economics question. It's called the typist lawyer. And the question is, are you bored by this? Because I'm laying a lot of stuff on you.
No, 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 you good. I love this. I love this. Go.
Okay. So the typist lawyer question is like the first day of economics class. There's a lawyer, and he's a very good lawyer, and he can charge $300 an hour when he's a lawyer.
Mhm.
He's also the greatest typist in the state of Minnesota. He can type so fast.
Mhm.
But you can get a secretary to type for $50 an hour. How much time should the lawyer spend typing? And the answer is
So,
none.
mhm.
The economic decision is he should hire a typist, even though she's slower, even though she's not as good, all the rest of it, because $50 an hour is not as much as $300 an hour. So if you can show lawyers ways to practice where they're being lawyers and they're not being typists, you have 100 years worth of people asking that economic question behind it to
Mhm.
explain why it's the correct economic decision.
Hey, and this question kind of you really answered it without me even asking, but I was going to ask, do you see any value in these AI systems that you mentioned or that I mentioned for a law firm? Like, for example, the voice assistant idea, but then again, you just answered the question before I even asked. But if you want to touch on it a little bit, you could go ahead. What values do
I
you?
think, yeah,
Yep.
I think voice assistant in workflows
Hmm.
probably very valuable. I think the types of things to use for screen for leads and such
Hmm.
that I'm having a harder time seeing the value in that. But you should continue to do market research for market fit. But I think voice assistance very important. Like when Alexa came along, um, there was some articles about that where people were concerned about Alexa listening in on a client meeting. There
Hmm.
were some things where people were trying to put legal tech into Alexa.
Hmm.
Schedule a meeting for me next week with this client. Alexa is a B2C tool. If you
Mhm.
want security and confidentiality and privacy, you probably need B2B tools.
Mhm.
So I think the opportunity for voice assistants has probably been there at least since Alexa came out, but it's never been able to be realized because the technology isn't strong enough and it's not really scalable at an enterprise or a firm level. But now those aren't the case anymore.
Okay. So give me 1 second. So the voice assistants are like, for example, Alexa or something like that. But a voice assistant in a workflow is much more valuable, and law firms are willing to pay for it compared to using voice assistants to just screen leads, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, and I think all products will start to have more voice assistants in them. Like I'm guessing that Microsoft Word will have that,
Hmm.
PowerPoint will have that, email will have that, where you'll be able to interface in it in a way, especially if it's powered by LLM, where PowerPoint is just going to be create a slide for me that shows a robot talking to an American flag, right?
Hmm.
No, not quite. Now do one where there's more sunlight, right? And it's going to just start doing that. That's where I think it's a pretty safe bet that that's where these products are going to end up.
Hmm.
When you're working in Word, it's going to be rephrase the second paragraph so that it's more client friendly. You're not going to be typing that in anymore because it's
Hmm.
so much faster to say it, right? And so I think when you look at legal tech or legal flows, it's going to be more like the past I was sort of describing. You're not
Hmm.
going to walk out the door and hand anything to a secretary anymore. The secretaries are all gone. But what
Hmm.
you're going to be telling them is, telling a computer is, okay, take the notes from that call, change this around, and you know, request a memo on this particular issue. And it's going to start to work more like that. It's going to be the Java stuff you're describing. That might take longer than we think, or it
Hmm.
could arrive much faster than we think. I don't know where to bet on that.
Okay. And then,
But I think solving for that has value. And
mhm.
the reason it has value is because the UI is so obviously good. It solves that problem of that cartoon or that comic strip we looked at, right?
Mhm.
Which is like you can just talk to it. And if it's not on track, you can just course correct it a little bit so it gets on track.
Right.
Versus like I'm going to create a piece of software that you've got to hit a bunch of buttons and everything else to do drafting and to do analytics and to do everything, like I don't think that's where things are going. You need those brains behind it, but you need an interface that's dead simple, super easy to use, even for lawyers that aren't very tech savvy.
Um, I'm saying interface. Awesome, awesome. And then what was it?
And if you find a developer to work on these things,
Mhm.
you'd want to find someone who's really good at working with APIs. I'm sure Zoom AI Companion has APIs. I'm sure Westlaw has APIs. And you'd want to find someone who knows how to use GitHub Copilot because then they're not even doing the coding anymore, right? Like
Mhm.
GitHub Copilot is at a stage where you can tell it what you want the software to do and it'll figure out the code. So there's a lot going on
Mhm.
right now where the ability to code is becoming easier. I wouldn't try to do it myself because I don't know what great looks like when it
Right.
comes to coding. I don't know, the best way to use these tools, but developer tools are way in front of other types of tools right now with AI. And so you can go on YouTube right now and you can watch people create a video game software program just by talking in
Mhm.
just a couple of minutes. You can create a game. Sam Altman, I think, has a video on that. So I think finding a developer where they understand, like, okay, we're gonna, Will or Tom's described a problem. Here's how I think about it. I know how to think as a lawyer. They know how to think as a developer, and
Mhm.
they see how to connect those wires, and they know how to write the software program that does that. I think that's a skill that you could probably find someone who could fit that skill set, but they have to be interested in the project. That's the hardest
Yeah.
part.
Yeah, because right now everything I'm doing, I'm just either teaching myself from YouTube and these different resources. You mentioned GitHub Copilot, so I'll check that out for sure. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
the hardest point, just figuring out finding somebody who's one interested and to motivated with it. Because right now I'm bootstrapping everything myself, so there's
yep,
no
been
money.
there. been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the hard part. I never had a lot of success finding a technology partner.
Hmm.
But I think that, the networks that you're in, um, like legal tech's a lot different than when I was screwing around with my little side hustle project. Like there's so much money going into it. I think you were wise to look at lawyers as a target market.
Hmm.
There's a lot of money there, and the technology needs a lot of work. So you
Right.
might be able to find someone who might not be super excited about making great tools for lawyers, but they're super excited about the idea that there's a lot of business here.
Yeah. And how do you you said when you were working on your startup, how did you find that developer for you? Like what did you
It took a
look
lot of
for? Yeah.
it took a lot of work. I'm going to put this in the chat here for
Okay.
you. Robert Ambrogi, if you haven't heard of him, is probably the most important name in legal tech. Robert, who I met briefly, is an older fellow, older than me, even if you think I'm old.
Hmm.
And he has reported on legal technology for 16 years. Every single thing that's ever happened in legal technology, he's reported on that's important. And he has seen this thing that was sort of just something that he was interested in a long time ago
Hmm.
take off as a market. So he has law sites, and what you'll find on law sites is you can see all the different legal tech companies that are out there
Hmm.
and which ones are in spaces that you're exploring.
Right.
How did I find a legal technologist? The way I describe that is like imagine asking the best looking person in high school to prom, right, or to the dance,
Yeah.
and you're not the quarterback, you're not a big star or anything like that, you're not all that popular.
Hmm.
That's what it's like trying to find a developer to get interested in legal tech. I could try to work through my network to find other people who might be interested, but you'd have to sort of have a white paper what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
um, so it's hard. We eventually found someone, but he was sort of in the role where we paid outside developers to do it, and he would just kind of review their work and make sure that it was going well.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, he passed away at 47 years of age. He got cancer, and
Yeah.
so our legal technologist passed away. And then I had one other partner, and we just sort of folded up the company after that because we didn't have a way to build or create anything,
Hmm.
because we were both lawyers and we're not developers. So I
Okay.
think it's important to have someone who can build or develop on your team,
Hmm.
if you want to get taken seriously as a legal tech company.
Okay.
But you also need someone who's really good at marketing and entrepreneurship and the rest of it. So
Yeah, so I think that's me. I just need to find a legal advisor, which I think I found you. So if you're open to it, I would like to stay
yeah,
connected, touch base.
of
I keep you
course,
updated, and then hopefully in the future we partner up and then bring you on, and then once the money coming in, whatever. But yeah,
we'll
that's
figure
a
it out.
yes, sir. So yeah, that's a great advice. So for now, I've been just making content about my business and the different AI automation tools. But with this call and the insights that you provided me, I'm now able to tailor my content to specific features or the specific outcomes that, either the voice assistant could do better instead of just qualifying leads, more like, issue spotting, like you said, and, just building some sort of interface that lawyers could use to eliminate more typing and just use their voice, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, cool.
All right. Let me see. Do I have Nah, th those are my only questions. Again, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to just speaking
Sure.
to me for an hour or so. I know you're a
Yeah,
busy
I'm sorry
person.
I talked very long, but I had the benefit of a lot of people when I was starting out who gave me a lot of their time, gave me a lot of advice. Some of it was great, some of it was good, some of it
Mhm.
wasn't so good.
Right.
But I'm sort of paying that forward to you. So I
Mhm.
hope that you make the most of what you're trying to do. And I think it's
Mhm.
really important to have people working to create better tools for technology for lawyers. So
Right.
keep going.